Good day and welcome. I'm Joey and this is Orange D20. Today I want to start doing something where I want to look at the behind the scenes aspects of building a campaign. So what I want us to do is start building out a West Marches style campaign. And I want to take you through kind of in depth every step that goes into the back end of running a D&D game. Today I want to work on the very first item that would come up, which I would call the pitch. This is what I would recommend doing before you start putting too much deep work into your game and actually making sure that you've got players who want to play your Dungeons and Dragons game. So what we're going to do is we're going to put out the high level idea and some of the expectations behind the game that we are looking to run. This is so you can make sure that the people who express interest in playing are on the same page as you. So what we're going to be doing today is preparing the pitch document. This is a way to communicate with your players what the game is actually going to be like. I would ascribe it to being the same as what you would write on the back of a module if you were creating kind of a professional module for sale. The exercise we're going to do today is more in depth than you would generally do. Everyone's style is going to be a little different. So what I want to do is kind of do the most complete version of a pitch document to show people what you might want to put in there and use it as an idea of you can take pieces of this and cut out what you don't need to your taste. At the end, I'll let you know what I tend to do when I'm actually pitching new games to a group I'm running for. As we're creating the pitch document, the first thing you need is the idea. And I've already got an idea in the back of my head that we're going to use as an example for this West Marches game. This game is going to be called the Royal Reclaimers Guild. Now, as a pitch document, I haven't worked out everything that's going to happen here. I have some basic ideas and I want to find players before I flesh them all out. So what I have now is the start of a world and the start of an idea and the feel of how I want play to go. This is a West Marches style game. So for those of you unfamiliar, and when you're pitching this to players, you might need to describe it. A West Marches style game is a type of game where you don't necessarily have the same players every week. The way it works is a group of 3 to 5 players who are all in the same campaign will get together and let the game master know which story hook they want to pursue at the time that they are ready to play. So you generally build a world with a bunch of different locations to explore, a bunch of different story hooks to go after, and you introduce the groups of players to each other. I've seen it done so that sometimes there is a rule that you can't go out with the same people every time. So if you played with 3 people last time, you need to have at least 2 new people in your group. So if it's a group of 3 to 5, if you went out with 3 people, you need to bring in 2 more people, and you can't keep playing with the same people again and again to get the groups kind of mixing up, because they have a living world that affects each other. I'm not necessarily one that would put that rule in. I would be comfortable if I was running this game having some of the players never interacting with others of the players and have their characters living the same world and hearing about each other's adventures and quests, but that is entirely up to taste. All characters belong to the Geldale chapter of the Royal Reclaimers Guild. Geldale, a city at the edge of the kingdom, sits amongst a plethora of ancient elven ruins and the fallen citadels of their enemies. Vast treasures and magical items beyond the ability for modern mages to create rest uneasy in these dungeons. The Reclaimers gather these artifacts for the king and bring them back into the world while destroying the horrors that hold them now. Ranging out from the Royal Reclaimers Guild. All guild members hunt bounties, follow ancient treasure maps, and delve into the ruins of ancient times. They are well paid for their work, although many are there to seek adventure. Now, part of what I'm doing here by writing out this information about the guild is I expect every player to make a character who wants to be a member of the guild. It is entirely okay when people are deciding their characters to say you must have this particular requirement. So in this case, you can make whoever you want as long as they're going to be members of the guild. I'm going to put in the general expectation that members of this guild generally work in groups. One of the things that can be difficult in a game is when someone wants to play a loner character. I find that there are some players who can handle having a loner personality and still being willing to be members of a team. And one thing I'll often say to someone who tells me they'd like to play a loner is it's your responsibility to stay in the story. If you wander far away from the rest of the group and won't come back, I'm going to focus on the group. And I put that responsibility on the player who wants to play that character. And I've had some people who play characters that feel very much like loners, but they have to be loners like Wolverine from the X-Men, who always find a reason to keep working with the X-Men. So I'm going to put in here the dangers of the wild, untamed lands around Geldale mean that these adventurers work together for mutual safety. So there's a little work I've already done on here, envisioning the city, envisioning the guild hall. So I'm going to put a little information about the city because part of what you're doing in the pitch is you're inviting the players to imagine the world that they're going to be part of. So Geldale rests in the middle of an overgrown wilderness. The rotted remains of a fallen elven empire litter the mountains and forests around the city. It is the last bastion of civilization this far west, and beyond its walls, chaos reigns. The city is mostly human, with some high elf, hill dwarf, and halfling inhabitants. So again, I want them to picture this city. The city itself is built over the ruins of an old elven outpost. And I want them to picture who they might be, what their life might be like in the city. I'm mentioning the main racial groups in there. because one of the things that people will be deciding is if they are from the city or from somewhere else. Now, part of what I'm doing is I have not envisioned much of the world beyond the city, and I'm leaving that blank. I haven't even named the kingdom that the city of Geldale is part of. So part of what I would look at doing is when someone comes in for a concept for someone who has come from far away and joins the city, if they have made up another country, then I would look at slotting that in the world. I don't need to have all the answers for everything that's out there. So if a player came to me and said, hey, is there like a seafaring nation that my pirate rogue could be from? Then I start turning it on them and asking them to carry some of the creative weight. Sure, there is, but you're helping me invent the nation. So you tell me what it's like. Whatever they say about that nation becomes true, or at least mostly true. I may have someone disagree with them and talk to them about, hey, so there's another noble house that believes this and you guys believe that. And most players love that, and the world builds out around them. I only need this one basic place. Now, one of the things I'm going to put in here is a little more about the guild hall, again, giving people idea on what they should be making. Guild members are adventurers, mercenaries, scholars, treasure hunters, and those who will risk their lives for coin. So again, if someone is making a character who will not go out of the dungeon without being forced, that's not a good fit for this game. The next thing I want to do is, part of the way I'm envisioning this game is people will make characters sometimes not with the rest of the group. I'm going to do an episode on a session 0, but that doesn't need to happen here. So the next thing I'm going to put in is a quick section on mechanics. And the worst part of making these videos, the way I'm doing them right now, is you're all going to see how terrible I am at spelling. So, players may roll for stats, roll 4d6 6 times, drop the lowest dice from each set, arrange to taste, or use the standard point array or point buy. I'm not really that concerned about the stats being too high in this game. 46 drop the lowest will generally lead to higher stats than standard point array. But what I would generally say to people is, hey, roll it out, and if it is lower than standard point array, then you can switch to standard point array or point buy. Players may choose any option from the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Xanathar's Guide, Bolo, or I can never spell Mordenkainen, so I've got the book just off camera there. Mordenkainen's, or Curse of Strahd. So, it is entirely fair as a dungeon master to put limits on the options of what your players can choose. Oh, there's one more I want to put in here. Or revised ranger is also allowed. As the dungeon master, you're going to be spending a lot more time preparing and reading than most people in most games. The sort of player who spends more time than a dungeon master is exceptionally rare and is an entirely different situation. It is fair for you to say, I'm not going to look at everything. So, for example, I have not bought every module. I know there are options in the Princes of Elemental Evil that I haven't looked at, and I don't know what they are. I don't own and don't plan to own Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. I'm just not interested. So any option that's listed just in there, I'm leaving out. I am not going to keep up on Unearthed Arcana, and I feel comfortable in these choices. It is entirely fair if you only want to give your players the options out of the player's handbook. I like a lot of the race options in the other books. Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes has an Eladrin option that I don't like as much as the Eladrin option in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but I wouldn't stop a player from playing that. It is entirely fair to leave out what you don't want to learn and what you don't want to deal with. And the only thing is, you should let your players know in advance. And if you are starting to get to the point where you're comfortable, I will let players make a case for a class or race option I haven't included. I've got a lot of stuff in here. I know there's some options in Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide that I don't know. I would be willing to consider them. Unearthed Arcana, I'm a little more careful with because Unearthed Arcana is playtest material printed online. But there is some of it that is really good. The version of the Ranger in Unearthed Arcana, the revised Ranger, I think it is superior to the one in the player's handbook. So I always leave that option open. I'm willing to talk to my players and let them tell me why they'd like to play something different, but they don't necessarily win just because they like something. At the end of the day, I have to be comfortable having it in my game. There are times in my games where I've considered things that are very strict. So, for example, I often have trouble figuring out how monks fit into the otherwise European fantasy worlds I'm building. So I have at times said monks are not an option, or monks need to be reflavored to be some kind of unarmed fighter not from a monastic tradition. That being said, I try to include as many options as I can. Themes. This game will focus on the themes of exploration and discovery, as well as survival. One of the things that I put in most of my games, and I wouldn't necessarily write in this document, I might put into a session 0, but my games do not include themes of sexualized violence. So there are a lot of things that come out of fantasy that I'm uncomfortable playing with at a table. It doesn't mean that that theme shouldn't be explored, but for example, I tend to have half-orcs come about as something out of a magic experiment instead of out of a raid, and like I don't want to include some of the themes of rape and abuse and sexual assault that I feel can be inherent in that racial option. I don't necessarily like leaving that written in the document, and I'm going to take that out. But it's something I would say to players, and it's something I would bring up in a session 0. My games also tend to take place in a gender equal world. I don't want to deal with the issues of sexism in the game. I do tend to leave in issues of speciesism. I dislike calling the fantasy races because they tend to be separate species, but I want to be careful and respectful with that, especially if I'm looking at playing someplace a little more public. So if I'm playing in a game store, I'm even more careful about the sort of fake racism that exists in D&D. and there's only so much I want to play with the idea of elves hating dwarves and dwarves hating elves. Uh, I get kind of tired of that pretty quickly, and I tend to leave it out. Again, if it's something you want to explore in your game, that's up to you. That's up to you and your players. The topics you're comfortable exploring and looking at, I tend to leave those items out. One of the other things I would consider for this game, and I still haven't decided, is this game may be. So this game will have a lower rate of wealth gain than standard D&D. Characters will be poorer and driven to continue adventuring to support their lifestyles. So I often like a game where players are barely getting by a little bit more. So getting some of those noir themes in, just trying to pay the bills. Getting some of that Cowboy Bebop flavor in there where you're not sure how you're going to eat if you don't go take another job. I am considering putting that in this game. I haven't done it yet. I would probably put this in the pitch document and then discuss it out in my first session 0. Now, talking about pitch documents a little more, I don't use them quite to this formal level in most of the games I run. I'm generally running with people who have played with me for a long time, and we generally make our characters together in a session 0, so I don't need to put in that mechanics section because I can talk it out with them when it comes time to actually make the characters. What I tend to do is I bring in 3 or 4, sometimes up to 10 even, different game ideas that I want to play. Based on the nature of who I am as a game master, I often have about 4 or 5, if not 10 again, different systems that I want to run my next game in. So I will bring a book to represent each of those and give a very quick kind of 3-sentence pitch. Hey guys, so these are my ideas. I want to play Rifts in the Savage Worlds setting in a junk town full of mercenaries. I am looking at Shadowrun, playing just very standard Shadowrunners looking to get together on jobs and do heists. I want to look at Kuru, which is a cyberpunk Japanese horror game. I would like to run Curse of Strahd, the vampire game in D&D. I would like to run Vampire the Masquerade. And I'll put those 5 ideas down in front of them. And you'll see that some of them are pretty closely related. But some of it becomes the different systems. And I'm explaining those to players as we talk them through. What's different about each game, what they can expect, and kind of letting them ask questions. And some of those questions will give me ideas or make me decide I don't want to run that game. Then we'll start a voting phase. And what I'll often do is say to each player, okay, you have 3 votes. You can vote for 3 different games, 2 votes to one game, 1 vote to another game, or all your votes to one game. And what we'll do is everyone will vote on the games they want, and then I will remove the game that got the least votes. And then everyone takes back their votes, because often what they're doing is each player will be using 3 of their dice to signify their votes, until we narrow it down to the final choice that most people agree on through that round robin of eliminations. Part of the reason I haven't done a bunch of extra work prior to that point is I want to make sure that I'm actually writing for the game that people will be playing. So I wouldn't recommend going this far beyond a pitch document for anyone else's sake until you know that you've got players for that game. That being said, it can be a lot of fun to write a game that you're never going to run. In fact, I don't expect I'll actually run the West Marches game we build out of this series, but I want to go through the exercise of building it to kind of show you the behind the scenes stuff that your game master is doing when you're not there. And I'm going to make sure that all of this becomes available to you so that you can use it yourself if you are interested in running the Royal Reclaimers game. So I'm going to be building out a few different resources on that, and making sure that you've got links to all of it. And I will put those in the description down below as I have those resources available to you. So that is building a pitch document. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions, or leave your ideas for a pitch in the description down below. Thanks, and have a great day.